Hey guys, tonight we're going back to the early hours of October 13th, 1995 just past 2.
Those heroes, right?
Where you're waking up flat on your back in the middle of a thorny patch of shrubs beside a cracked and faded parking lot in Fairhaven, Maine. The streetlight nearby flickers with a faint buzz, casting long shadows across the pavement. It smells like rust, cold soil, and something sour like fear clinging to your jacket. You're disoriented. Your hands sting. Your scalp feels wet. And your head, your poor, throbbing head feels like it's been used as a drum. You try to sit up. Bad idea. A sharp pain shoots through your side, and your vision swims. You grab for something, anything to stabilize yourself, but all your fingers find are damp leaves and a crushed plastic bottle. You're not just lost, you've been dumped here, left like trash behind a rundown lot you don't remember walking to. Your clothes are dirty, torn in places, and your left wrist has a long, nasty bruise crawling up the bone, and then the realization crashes in: you're alone. Rachel isn't beside you. The worst part, there's no scream in your throat, no voice left, just the whisper of panic starting to curl around your chest like smoke. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still listening, drop your location and your local time in the comments. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crawl out of the brush slowly, each movement a test of what still works. Knees, sort of. Ankles, barely. Your face feels hot and wet, but the rest of your body is freezing. It's Maine, after all, and mid-October can be a cruel little prankster. As you emerge from the shrubs, you see your purse unzipped but untouched, sitting next to a folded jacket on a nearby bench. But Rachel's not there. You call her name once, twice. Your voice is hoarse, like something scraped it clean on the way out. And that's when you see it, the bat. It's lying a few feet away in the grass, covered in something you'd rather not identify. And it hits you, not a dream. You remember now the house party, the walk, the man who stepped out from behind the bushes like a magician pulling himself from the shadows. Only his trick wasn't illusion, it was intimidation. The slurs, the threats, the cold command. Lie down, face in the dirt. And the terror in Rachel's voice when she whispered, "What is he going to do to us?" You tried to be brave. You tried to fight. You did fight, but the bat landed harder. And Rachel, she was just gone when you woke up. You know this part of town? Not well, but well enough. Fairhaven Memorial Hospital is about a half-mile west. So you move, one dragging step at a time. You pass a gas station with flickering lights and a vending machine humming a haunting little tune that somehow still works. No cars, no people, just the sound of your breath shallow and wheezing, and the pounding of your heart trying to escape your chest. You make it to the ER entrance just as the automatic doors hiss open. The nurse on duty screams when she sees you. Not dramatically, not in a horror movie way, just a sharp, instinctual reaction like seeing roadkill blink. Then others swarm in. You're lowered to a gurney, IV tubes, a flashlight in your eyes, and murmurs that sound like you're underwater. BP's low. What the hell happened? To her, someone's clipping your blood-soaked shirt. Someone else is cutting off your jeans. And through all the noise, one phrase forms clearly on your lips. Rachel, he took her. The whole room stops. It's strange how quickly chaos can turn into strategy. Someone calls the police. Someone else is already rolling your gurney toward a trauma bay. You hear a voice radio in. Possible abduction. White female. Late teens. Still missing. And you think, did she get away? Did he let her go? Or you don't finish the thought. Instead, you stare at the harsh fluorescent lights above you, trying to piece together the last thing you remembered before everything went black. The man was tall, strong. He had a weird patch on his forehead, bald, but not completely. Just a moon-shaped crescent that made his face look unfinished, like someone gave up drawing halfway through. His beard was thick, matted. His breath smelled like beer and old meat. And his voice was the kind you'd hear in nightmares. Not angry, not wild, just flat. Like this wasn't the first time. Historians still argue whether certain crimes leave a deeper imprint in the cultural memory because of their brutality or their randomness. But you're starting to believe it's not either. It's the quiet, the cold, efficient evil of someone who doesn't panic, who doesn't need a reason, Who just decides tonight's the night? Fun historical fact to lighten the mood. In 17th century England, people believed carrying dried toad bones in your pocket could ward off evil spirits. Not super useful now, unless you think he was a ghost. Spoiler, he wasn't. And one quirky tidbit for you, Fairhaven's actually known for its annual Maine Clam Festival, which draws crowds from all over. Bet you didn't think the town that celebrates bivalves with marching bands and pie-eating contests would be the backdrop to something like this. You fade in and out of consciousness over the next few hours. A detective named Callahan leans over your bed. He smells like peppermint and damp wool. He asks for a name. You mumble yours. Then he asks, "Can you describe him?" You nod once, slowly, and the real nightmare begins. You're propped up in a hospital bed, stitched, bandaged, and barely conscious, but memory is cruel. It doesn't wait until you're ready. It just arrives in flashes, in smells, in echoes. Detective Callahan sits at your bedside, scribbling in a worn leather notebook. His voice is calm, too calm for what you've just lived through. "Let's go back," he says softly. "Tell me what happened before the parking lot." You stare at the IV bag above you like it might have the answer. But the real answer is, earlier that night, the house party. You and Rachel had been at Kyle Banner's off-campus place. It wasn't wild, more of a warm blur of cheap beer, mismatched furniture, and echoey music from someone's half-broken stereo. You danced with Rachel under Christmas lights strung across the living room ceiling. She laughed so hard at something stupid you said that she nearly dropped her solo cup. It was just one of those nights that made you feel 19 and invincible. You didn't want it to end. When people started heading out, some crashing on beanbags, some calling rides, you and Rachel looked at each other and shrugged. One more place. There was a diner near the docks that stayed open late. You could split a milkshake and people watch. It wasn't far. A 15-minute walk, tops, and Fairhaven always felt safe. It was the kind of town where the sidewalk still gets swept, and old men tip their hats. But the thing about feeling invincible, it's just a feeling. You both set off around midnight, shoes clicking against the cool pavement, the ocean breeze teasing your hair. You talked about finals, about that weird guy in history class who smelled like fish sticks, about maybe road tripping to Boston over break. Rachel did her usual thing, arms linked with yours, humming a tune, skipping over cracks like a child. You passed a few dark storefronts, a flickering streetlight, a row of empty bike racks, and then the parking lot. It didn't look threatening, just a wide slab of concrete beside a boarded-up convenience store. But the second you stepped past the shrubs, he stepped out. At first, it felt like a hiccup in time, like someone hit pause. A man, tall, late 30s, maybe older, balding on top with that strange crescent patch of skin above his temple. He wore a dark hoodie and jeans, no mask, no hesitation. You thought he was another night walker, a janitor maybe, until he raised the bat and said, "Stop, both of you." It was the way he held it, two hands, like he was already mid-swing. The tip tapped the ground near your feet, loud and deliberate. Rachel said something polite. "Hey, sorry, we're just passing through," but he didn't want a conversation. "Take off your jackets." Now, your stomach dropped. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it, like he was reciting a grocery list. You hesitated, and he screamed. Now, that's when he moved toward Rachel. He jabbed the bat at her shins, driving her back. You followed, trying to calm him down, babbling something about not having any money. But it wasn't about that. You could tell. He didn't ask for cash. He didn't ask for phones. He said, "Take off your clothes, or I'll kill you." That's when the switch flipped. You realized this wasn't a robbery. This wasn't desperation. It was ritual. Rachel started to cry. Not loudly, not like in the movies, just these tiny, gasping whimpers that made your throat tighten. You tried to talk to him, offered to leave your purse, promised you wouldn't call anyone, that you wouldn't tell. But the man with the bat didn't care about promises. He told you both to lie face down in the bushes. Rachel looked at you like, "Is this happening?" You both lay down, face in the dirt, cold leaves scratching your cheek. You heard him set the bat down. You heard the zip, and your body moved on its own. You lunged, grabbed the bat, and spun around swinging like your life depended on it, because it did. You hit his shoulder, a sickening crunch. He howled, but it wasn't over. He spun, grabbed the bat back, and brought it down once, twice, 3 times. You don't remember the rest. just that it hurt, and then black. Historians still argue whether towns like Fairhaven ever really had golden eras periods of total innocence. But stories like yours remind people that no town, no matter how coastal or cozy, is immune to darkness. Fun fact, in the 1800s, Fairhaven was actually a booming shipbuilding port. Whale ships docked here. There's a statue downtown of a sea captain staring out to the Atlantic like he's waiting for storms. They called it the town that built itself on the sea and hoped it never drowned. Pretty poetic for a place where teenagers now get attacked behind convenience stores. Fringe tidbit. There's an old lighthouse about 6 miles out, rumored to be haunted by a sailor who disappeared during a card game in 1912. Apparently, he lost, walked out onto the water, and never returned. Locals say you can still hear him shuffling cards in the fog, but right now, the only sound you remember is that scream, Rachel's scream, the one that got cut off halfway. You're back in the hospital bed now, looking at Callahan. He asks you again, what did he look like? You close your eyes. You see that patch of bald skin? That beard? That flat, calm stare like he was doing his job. You whisper, like someone who's done this before. You're drifting in and out, the hospital bed pressing into your spine like it's trying to remind you you're still here, that you made it. Nurses come and go, voices low and feet soft. One of them changes your IV and hums a lullaby you recognize but can't name. Outside your room, the hallway lights glow like a runway, but in your head, it's still that parking lot, still his eyes, still the sound of Rachel's scream cutting short. Then the detective comes back. Callahan pulls up a chair and tells you gently, they found your friend's phone 2 blocks from the parking lot. Smashed. Screen shattered like ice. The SIM card ripped out. That's not just violence. That's someone who knows how to disappear. You want to believe Rachel got away, that maybe she's just in hiding or unconscious somewhere safe. But your chest knows better, your skin knows better, and deep in your gut, there's a silence that feels too heavy to be hope. At sunrise, the town wakes up. Most people have no idea what happened last night. Kids wait for school buses. Grocery clerks unload pallets of milk. Fairhaven yawns its way into another sleepy October morning. But on the east side of town, near Stillwater River, a fisherman is casting lines just after 8 a.m. And then he sees something. Floating just off the bank, tangled in weeds and foam, is a shape. Pale, still, not fish, not trash. He calls it in. 20 minutes later, the crime scene is taped off. EMTs try not to make eye contact with each other as they haul her body out of the river. It's Rachel. You don't know this yet, not until Callahan walks back into your hospital room with a face like rain clouds. He doesn't speak at first, just sits there. You know before he says a word, she's gone. He finally tells you. You ask, how? He hesitates. You already know what that means, but he answers anyway. She drowned, but not before. He trails off, and you fill in the blanks. Assaulted, beaten, left in the water like a thing, a bruise on her chest shaped like teeth. His teeth, as if he wanted to leave a signature. Her clothes were found nearby, not folded, not buried, hung from branches, like trophies or a message. The kind that says, I'm not done. You turn your head toward the window and shut your eyes. Historians still argue whether ritualistic killers are driven more by compulsion or ego. But this feels like performance. Like someone staging pain for an audience only he can see. Fun fact to ruin your clam chowder. Fairhaven used to host a traveling circus every summer in the 20s. It featured a magician named Silas Gray, who once made a horse vanish on the beach. People swore they saw hoofprints go into the sea but never come back. He was famous for about 2 years before mysteriously vanishing himself. Some say he faked his own death. Others claim he just got tired of applause. But this man, the one who took Rachel, he doesn't want applause. He wants control. And now that you're the only witness, you realize something terrifying. He's still out there, and you might still be a part of the show. Detectives spread out. They canvass the area around the river, the parking lot, the party house, the diner you never reached. They collect fibers, take statements, track footprints, but it's all noise. There's no clarity until nightfall at 3:12 p.m. on October 18th. 4 days after the attack, the phone rings at Fairhaven PD. Not the 911 line, the direct desk of lead investigator Sam Gerber. He picks up expecting some tip or angry neighbor. Instead, he hears, so, still no suspect. A man's voice, flat, calm, mocking. I thought the cops in this town were smarter. The caller says, you let me walk away. Then, I did it. Gerber freezes. The man goes on to describe details of Rachel's body things never released to the public. The bruise, the order of events, the clothing in the tree, and just before hanging up, he says, I'm not done. Callahan hears the replay and turns pale. You hear it too. That voice, the same tone you remember behind the bat, but now it's coming from a phone. The department scrambles. They trace the call. A payphone just 4 blocks from the station. Officers run, sirens wail, but when they get there, it's empty. No prints, no witnesses, just a faint smell of cigarette smoke. And then 20 minutes later, he calls again. This time, he laughs. You think I'm dumb enough to leave prints. He's not breathing hard, not rushing, just talking, like this is a game. And he's winning. In one day, he calls 4 times, each from a different payphone, each time slipping away before the officers arrive. That night, the Fairhaven PD realizes 2 things. 1, this guy is clever, maybe even professional. And 2, you are not safe. You're moved to a higher floor. 2 uniformed officers are posted outside your room. The nurses draw the blinds and remove your name from the patient list. The phone system at the station gets upgraded overnight with a new real-time trace system. If he calls again, they might catch him. But for the next 2 weeks, the line goes silent, and you begin to wonder which is worse, hearing his voice again or never hearing it again. The days pass slowly, the kind of slow that makes time feel like it's pressing down on your chest. Hospital food comes and goes, untouched. Nurses ask if you want the TV on, you don't. Every creak of the hallway floor, every voice outside your door makes your pulse spike. You dream about the sound of the bat hitting pavement, about Rachel reaching for you but always just out of reach. The police bring in a sketch artist. You don't want to describe him. You'd rather bleach the memory and never speak it aloud. But they need your help. So you start with the obvious. Tall, around 6'2", strong, balding. But not completely just that strange crescent of smooth skin at the top of his forehead. And the beard, thick, messy, like he hadn't shaved in weeks but still took the time to brush it. And his eyes, cold, not angry, not excited, just empty. Like he was waiting for you to scream but wouldn't be disappointed if you didn't. You sit with the artist for hours. He listens patiently, adjusting strokes, nodding when you say no. The nose was flatter, or his chin stuck out more. When he finally turns the sketchboard around, your stomach flips. Because that's him, not a perfect copy. But the feeling is right. That awful familiarity in the proportions, the way the eyes seem to stare through the paper. They release the sketch to the press the next day. It spreads fast. Fairhaven is a small town. By nightfall, it's on the 6 o'clock news. By morning, it's gone regional, then national, unknown. Attacker wanted in Maine assault and homicide. Tip lines light up. Everyone thinks they know someone. It could be a neighbor, a cousin, a guy they saw at the gas station. Dozens of leads pour in. None of them pan out. One tip comes from a woman who swears she saw him on a fishing boat near the harbor. Turns out, it was just a guy wearing a beanie with a similar beard. Another lead sends them chasing a man who'd been arrested years ago for stalking. Wrong height, wrong build. Dead end. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, your body slowly knits itself back together. Bruises fade into yellow. Cuts scab over. But your mind feels like a cracked windshield still holding together. But just barely. The therapists say it's okay to cry, but the tears never quite come. You just watch yourself eat, sleep, answer questions like you're performing the role of someone who survived, and then Halloween arrives. You're still in the hospital, still guarded, but the hallway is decorated with paper pumpkins and plastic skeletons. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse wears a witch hat and hands out lollipops to pediatric patients. You stare out your window and wonder how many trick-or-treaters are wandering past the very payphones he once used. At 8:47 p.m., the station's new system lights up. He calls again. Same flat voice, same mockery. Miss me. This time, the call is traced to a booth across from Sonny's diner, just 3 blocks from where Rachel and you had been heading that night. Officers arrive in less than 4 minutes. He's already gone. but this time they catch a break. A waitress saw him. She'd stepped outside for a smoke and noticed a man leaving the booth. Looked like someone's dad, she said. Gray hoodie, bit of a limp, didn't even look rushed. The detective asks, anything else? Tattoos, a bag. She shrugs. Nope, just plain, average. That's what made him stick out. Honestly, historians still argue whether our fear of strangers is rooted in logic or superstition, but it's these kinds of men, the forgettable ones who seem to hide best in plain sight. Weird tidbit. In the early 1900s, Maine had a brief panic over phantom gassers, mysterious men who reportedly sprayed sleeping families through open windows, causing illness or hallucinations. Never proven. Possibly mass hysteria, but the fear stuck around for decades. That's what this guy feels like now. A phantom, real but unreachable, present but always one step ahead. The FBI is called in. A profiler joins the case. He's got a beard of his own and wears suspenders like he walked off the set of a true crime documentary. He studies the phone calls, the crime scene, your sketch. He builds a psychological profile. He's done this before, the profiler says, or at least fantasized about it for a long time. His guess, white male, late 30s to early 50s, likely lives alone, possibly works a blue-collar job, intelligent, but resentful, enjoys manipulating people, especially authority figures, might have a criminal record, but minor offenses, enough to know how the system works, narcissistic, likes watching the news coverage, feels powerful when others panic. You listen from the hallway, just out of view, and for the first time you feel like you're not the center of the story anymore. You're part of something bigger, and that's somehow even scarier. The profiler's words sink in like fog rolling over the docks, slow, cold, and permanent. You're no longer just a victim of a random act. You're the survivor of a pattern. And patterns mean he could strike again. The police stop calling him the suspect. Now they say the predator, the perpetrator, or worse, the repeat offender, because it's no longer if he'll do it again, it's when, and he knows they know. Still, the phone lines go quiet. 1 week. 2. No calls, no sightings, no fresh leads, just static. You're released from the hospital under police escort and moved to a safe house outside town. It's not much one-story brick. Beige walls, a couch that smells like someone else's dog, but it has locks. And for now, that feels like a luxury, but silence, as it turns out, is a sound all its own. Every creak becomes a footstep. Every knock makes your stomach turn. You don't sleep. You watch the local news on mute, waiting to see if they'll say your name again. You still hear his voice in your head, like a bad radio frequency you can't tune out. Then, in early December, there's movement, a new tip. The department receives a call from a parole officer in Bangor about an ex-mechanic named Travis Drexler. He's in his 40s, lives alone, has a record for minor assaults and disorderly conduct, balding, bearded, stocky build. The parole officer saw the sketch and thought it looked eerily close. So they bring him in. You're called back to the station under protection. You don't see him in person, they know better than that. They show you a photo instead, and your reaction, immediate. Your breath catches. It's close, very close. The eyes, the jawline, even that weird forehead shape. But close isn't enough. They get a warrant for Travis's DNA. They compare it to the sample taken from Rachel's bite mark. The lab techs work fast, everyone holding their breath. It takes 3 days, no match. Travis is ruled out. And just like that, you're back to square one. Historians still argue whether early forensic science was more science or theater in the 1990s. DNA was cutting edge, but not yet foolproof. It was expensive, time-consuming, and not universally accepted in court. Sometimes, it did more to raise doubts than deliver truth. Fun facts. In 1995, the year this case began, the O.J. Simpson trial was wrapping up. That case and its DNA evidence was already changing how juries saw science. But here in Fairhaven, science wasn't a silver bullet. Not yet. And speaking of bullets, this guy didn't use one. He chose a bat, a blunt object, intimate, brutal, loud, which told the profiler something else. This wasn't just about control, it was about proximity. He wanted to be close when the fear took hold, to see it, feel it, feed off it. The town starts to quiet down, the media coverage thins. People assume the danger has passed, But you don't, because deep down, you know what silence really means. And you're right. In February 1996, 4 months after the attack, the predator makes his biggest mistake. A woman living alone in Fairhaven reports her window was smashed sometime after midnight. No burglary, no signs of entry. But when she checked the living room, she found something on the floor, a crowbar. Taped to it was a letter handwritten, 4 pages long. It began, "You don't know me, but I know your house." It wasn't a threat. Exactly. More like a monologue. Rambling. Smug. He described the night he attacked you, the moment Rachel screamed, the sound of the bat on your ribs, all in vivid, graphic detail. And then he signed it, "You'll never find me, but I'll know when you're looking." They bagged the crowbar, the letter, the tape, took it all to the lab, and for the first time they found something useful, a fingerprint. Clear, right on the metal beneath the tape. The print didn't match anyone in the national database. He wasn't a felon. He'd never been booked. Or if he had, it was under a different name. But the tone of the letter, familiar. The detectives reviewed the taped phone calls from October. They played them for the lab, for the profiler, for linguists, and finally for the public. A special aired that weekend. It featured the voice recordings, the sketch, and the crowbar letter in excerpts. A desperate move, a Hail Mary. The next day, the department phone rang. An elderly woman on the line, soft voice. "Clear, I know that voice," she said. "That's my son. His name is Thomas Driver." She gave them everything. Address, work history, where he grew up, even his childhood habits. Turns out, Thomas had lived in Fairhaven for decades, worked odd jobs, fixed small engines, was always polite, always quiet. No one looked twice at him. But his mother, she'd heard those words before. Not the crimes, the cadence, the mocking. The way he joked about fooling people, how he used to call radio shows and prank them by pretending to be police officers. She always thought it was harmless. Until now, the police pull his record. 1 juvenile offense, trespassing. Nothing major, no adult charges. Which is why he'd slipped through every system until this moment. And now they had a name. The name alone doesn't feel like enough. Thomas Driver. So plain, so unremarkable. It sounds more like the lead in a tax seminar than the kind of man who would script horror with a baseball bat and a smile. But as soon as his name enters the system, things begin to fall into place. Thomas Driver, born 1957, lifelong Fairhaven resident, lived with his mother for nearly 2 decades, moved out briefly in the late 80s, then returned after some trouble upstate. Though no public records show what kind. His current address, a rundown trailer on the outskirts of town, near an abandoned lumber yard. Police waste no time. They stake the place out. No flashy raid, no sirens, just quiet boots on gravel, low voices, and the sense that something important, something final is finally within reach. At 6:22 a team moves in. Thomas is still asleep when they find him. No resistance, no screaming. He opens the door wearing sweatpants and a Fairhaven Fire Department hoodie, something he probably picked up at a thrift store to blend in. He blinks at the officers like they've interrupted his morning coffee. "Do you know why we're here?" one of them asks. Thomas just smiles. "Took you long enough." They find more than they expected. Inside his trailer, a duffel bag with duct tape, rope, gloves, clippings of the newspaper articles about your case, all cut with obsessive precision. A battered cassette recorder one used to practice his voice calls before making them. A box of old photos women, mostly candid shots, many from a distance. No names, no dates, but the smoking gun. A second crowbar, wrapped in cloths, in the back of his closet, and on it, another partial print. This one matches the one left at the scene of the broken window. It's enough. They bring him in, book him. The charges stack up like bricks. Attempted murder, sexual assault, abduction, homicide, evidence tampering. And still he says almost nothing to everyone else. Thomas is a cipher, but to you, he's a mirror of that night. So when Callahan offers you the chance to face him behind glass, under full protection, you don't say no. You sit in a small viewing room. A wall of glass separates you from the interview space where he sits chained at the wrists, leaning back like he owns the place. He doesn't see you, but you see him. And what hits you isn't rage. It's how normal he looks. The kind of guy you'd pass at a hardware store. The kind of guy who might hold a door open and mumble something polite, but under the surface, that same stillness, that flatness. You listen as the detectives question him. He deflects, smirks, offers little bits of truth, then retracts them. Like he's toying with the line between confession and performance, Callahan leans in and says, "Alyssa remembers everything." And for the first time, Thomas tenses. He looks up, toward the mirror toward you, though he can't see you. And you remember everything too. The way his voice sounded when he said, "Lie down." The exact grip he had on the bat. The smell of his clothes' motor oil. Sour meat. Cold sweat. The sound Rachel made right before she disappeared. Historians still argue whether criminal justice is about rehabilitation or retribution. But in this room, the only thing that matters is the silence. The look in his eyes, the fact that now he's the one who doesn't know what comes next. Fun fact, in medieval England, suspects were once tested by trial, by ordeal. One method involved plunging your hand into boiling water. If the wound healed clean, you were innocent. Brutal, sure, but it carried a certain poetry. Pain is proof. And fringe tidbit for you, some criminal profilers believe that killers like Thomas deliberately insert themselves into investigations, not just to watch, but to control the storyline. They want to edit the narrative, direct it, make it about them. But now he's no longer the narrator. You are. Your statement becomes part of the official record. You describe his face, his words, the arc of the bat. Every detail paints him into a corner. And when the trial begins, your testimony is the star. The jury doesn't take long. Guilty on all counts. He's sentenced to life without parole. No bargaining, no media tour, no final monologue. Just a cell and a metal door that shuts louder than any applause. But closure, that's a different kind of sentence. Because even with him behind bars, you still wake up reaching for Rachel, still check behind you in parking lots, still flinch when you hear a certain kind of laugh. You survived. But part of you lives in October 1995, and part of you always will. The trial ends with the kind of gavel slam that's supposed to bring relief. Headlines call it a victory. Fairhaven monster sentenced to life. Local papers print your name beside words like brave and hero. But no one writes about what happens after the courtroom clears. No one reports on what it's like to hear his voice in your dreams or see him in strangers' faces at the grocery store. You move again. Quietly, a town 1 county over. Fresh lease, new number. No mention of Fairhaven in your file. You keep the blinds closed. You learn how to sleep with a nightlight. You stop wearing headphones on walks. And you never, ever take the scenic route again. People ask you if it feels over. You smile. Say yes, but it doesn't. Not really. Because on some nights, your brain replays the scene like a loop. The walk, the laugh, the bat tapping the ground, Rachel looking at you like this can't be real. And then it was. You keep her photo on your nightstand. The same one from freshman year, both of you in ugly sweaters, holding hot chocolate like you're about to take on the world. You talk to her sometimes, whisper things you didn't get to say, apologize for running. Apologize for Darmas. Grief isn't a clean wound. It's messy, awkward, and always shows up late. Then, a year to the day after the attack, you get a call from Detective Callahan. He says something you don't expect. Would you want to meet his mother? You freeze. Why? She asked. Said she wanted to say something, but only if you're ready. You take a week to think. You chew on it like an old bone you can't swallow. Then, finally, you say yes. The meeting takes place in a quiet room at the station. No press, no cameras, just 2 chairs, a box of tissues, and the woman whose tip cracked the whole case open. She walks in slow, holding a sweater against her chest like armor. She's in her 70s, soft voice, worn shoes. Her eyes meet yours, and for a long moment, neither of you says a word. Then she speaks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. You nod. Because what else can you do? She talks about Thomas, about the boy he was, the things she missed, the signs she ignored, how she used to find him standing outside, barefoot, in the middle of the night, just watching the trees, how he'd collect bottle caps, arrange them in shapes, then destroy them without blinking. She says she thought he'd grow out of it. He didn't. You listen. Because part of healing is listening even to the hardest stories, even to the ones that scrape against your ribs. Historians still argue whether evil is born or made, whether monsters are forged by pain, neglect, or something darker that science hasn't yet found words for. But in that moment, sitting across from his mother, you realize something simple and terrible. He didn't come from nowhere, he came from someone. Fun fact, Maine's state motto is Dirigo Latin for I lead. It's printed on the state seal, above a lone star, but sometimes leadership doesn't look like standing tall. Sometimes it looks like calling a number, naming a name, and tearing your life apart to stop someone else's. Fringe tidbit. There's a local urban legend about the Stillwater Echo. They say if you scream near the Stillwater River at night, the trees will whisper the scream back to you years later. A joke. Mostly a campfire story, but it sticks in your mind. You think about Rachel. You wonder what her echo sounds like now. You leave the station lighter, not whole, not healed, but a little less haunted. And that matters. Healing isn't a finish line. It's a spiral. You revisit things, sometimes deeper, sometimes softer. But every time, you come back a little stronger. You start speaking at community events, not dramatic TED-style talks, just quiet rooms of survivors, social workers, students. You tell your story. You watch their faces as they listen. And afterward, people line up not to talk, but to thank you for naming the fear they couldn't explain. You learn their names too. And the pattern becomes clear. The silence was never personal. It was systemic. You weren't the first. You won't be the last. But now you speak. Now you lead. And somewhere out there, maybe in a town just like yours, someone hears your voice and decides, I'm not crazy. I'm not alone. I'm not broken. And for the first time, maybe they sleep without checking the door 3 times. You thought testifying was the hardest part. You were wrong. Because healing doesn't happen under oath. It happens in the ordinary. Like the first time you walk past a baseball bat in a store aisle and don't flinch. Or when you go out at night alone for milk. Tiny things, nothing heroic. Just life, trying its best to seep back in. Fairhaven goes quiet again. The press moves on. The phone lines stop buzzing. Halloween comes and goes the next year without a single call from a payphone. And people start talking about Thomas Driver like he's some ghost story. The guy from that case. Remember? They forget the details. You don't? You visit Rachel's grave on a Tuesday. The air sharp with October cold. You bring a flower she would have hated, white lilies. Too funeral chic, but you bring them anyway. Her mom is there too, wearing sunglasses even though it's overcast. You don't talk much. You just sit in the silence and let it ache. And then, just as you're about to leave, her mom says, she'd be proud of you. You know, you nod. But pride feels strange because you're still figuring out what surviving really means. Meanwhile, the police review cold cases, old files, assaults that didn't fit any pattern until now. Turns out, Thomas had a pattern after all, not in frequency, but in style. 10 years earlier, a woman in Bangor was attacked near a parking lot. No weapon, just fists. No clear motive. Her attacker whispered her name before hitting her. She never figured out how he knew it. Case unsolved. She sees your interview on the news and comes forward. It was him. She's sure of it. Another case, 1989. A jogger found unconscious beside a lake in Bar Harbor. The scene was staged to look like a mugging. No suspects, but a bite mark left behind. Same molar pattern. They send those old samples for DNA analysis. Technology has come a long way in just a few years. It's a match. Thomas Driver wasn't just a one-off monster. He was a roaming storm. And you were the first to survive and name him. Historians still argue whether the early warning signs of serial offenders are more often spotted by parents, partners, or total strangers. But in this case, it was all 3. A parole officer, a waitress, and a mother who finally said enough. It makes you wonder how many monsters just blend in. How many are still out there, just waiting for silence? Fun fact, the term serial killer didn't exist until the 1970s. FBI profiler Robert Ressler coined it after realizing that certain cases didn't fit traditional homicide motives. Before that, the crimes were labeled crimes of passion or random violence. Language, it turns out, matters. You can't fight what you can't name. And fringe trivia for the night. There's a theory that scent, specifically trauma-related scent, is encoded more deeply in memory than sound or sight, meaning that metallic, muddy smell from the parking lot, it might never fully leave your brain. You might walk past a garden hose in the sun one day and suddenly be there again. Brains are cruel like that. You learn to anticipate those moments. You start therapy, not just the talk about your feelings kind, but EMDR, the kind where your brain is coaxed into rewriting how it holds the trauma. It's weird. It's exhausting, but it works. A little, then a little more. You meet others, not just survivors, but people who lost someone. Brothers, daughters, grandfathers, people with scar tissue that doesn't show. You share your story, they share theirs, and together something shifts. You're no longer a witness. You're part of a lineage, a quiet, powerful chain of people who refuse to be erased. And then one night Callahan calls you again. You haven't spoken in months. There's something you should see, he says. You meet him at the station. He hands you a manila envelope. Inside, a photo of a tree. In the branches, torn fabric. Gray, familiar. It's from a hiker, deep in the woods north of Stillwater. Thought it looked weird. Sent it in. No bones found. No body, but it's the same setup. Clothing draped like a trophy. The location, a place Thomas used to fish. They keep it quiet. No press, no public alarm. But you know what it means? There might be more. You stand at the edge of that forest a week later, not to investigate, not to poke around, just to feel. You let the wind hit your face. You close your eyes, and you say her name. Not a whisper, not a sob, just Rachel. Because this was never just about him. It was about who gets remembered and who doesn't. You stand there for a long time beneath that skeletal tree, where fabric still flutters like a cruel flag. It's torn, weather-stained, but unmistakably human. You don't touch it. You don't need to, because even if no bones are found, no name uncovered, you feel it. Someone else was left here. Someone else mattered once. It's strange how grief can expand to include people you've never met. You start to carry them too. After that day, you begin making lists, not of what happened, but of what didn't. You didn't die. You didn't forget. You didn't let silence win. And somewhere in that list, you scribble Rachel's name. Then a question. How many others? The police open what they call a pattern file. They compare Thomas's timeline to missing persons reports, some as far back as the late 80s. Young women who vanished after parties, joggers who were never found, hitchhikers presumed runaway. Some were never even searched for properly. You flip through the file and your breath catches, because one of the girls, she looks like Rachel. Same smile, same wide eyes, different town, different year, but same ending. They'll never know for sure, but you do. Historians still argue whether we're better at catching killers now because of technology or because of narrative. Because we're finally listening to patterns, not dismissing them. But you know firsthand that neither AI nor forensics saved you. Rachel did. Her scream, her refusal to go quietly, her name in your mouth when you stumbled into the hospital. You never let go of that. And now, you're speaking to rooms full of people who need to hear it. Sometimes it's a classroom, sometimes a library. Once, a battered women's shelter, where a woman with a bruised cheek holds your hand for 30 silent seconds before leaving without a word. You don't need words. That's silence. That's understanding. You start using your name again. Not the alias you used when you moved. Not the nickname the papers gave you. Alyssa Monroe. It's a small act of defiance. And it feels good. But it doesn't fix everything. You still jump at slamming doors. You still feel your breath get thin when a stranger walks behind you at night. You still avoid parking lots after sunset. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It just means living anyway. You get a job, not law enforcement, not counseling, just something simple. A bookstore tucked into a quiet downtown block. You shelve thrillers and biographies, and every now and then, someone hands you a copy of a true crime paperback with your own story buried in the middle. They never recognize you. You're just the quiet girl with the barcode scanner. But inside, you're no longer quiet. Because you've learned something crucial, something Rachel never got the chance to. You get to write your own ending. You return to Fairhaven one more time, 2 years after the attack, not for court, not for media, just to walk, to retrace your steps, not to relive it. But to reclaim it, you start at the party house. It's still there. Faded blue paint peeling a little more than before. Then the sidewalk, the diner, the street lamp that still flickers, and finally the parking lot. It's smaller than you remember. But memory has a way of making monsters bigger. You step past the shrubs. They've grown back. No sign of blood. No bat, just earth and leaves and quiet. You stand there, breathing deep. No panic, no flashbacks, just presence. And then you do something bold. You sit down right in the middle of the lot. You let the wind touch your hair. Let the chill bite your skin. Let the night know you're not afraid anymore. Fun fact, in ancient Rome, trauma survivors were sometimes honored with public rituals called restitutions, not legal compensation, but spiritual acknowledgement, a community act of saying, "We see you." Fringe theory. Some cultures believe that returning to the place of trauma seals the loop, turns an open wound into a closed circle, a story with an ending, not just an echo. You think of Rachel, and that fisherman, and the detective, and Thomas's mother, and all the people who called in, who believed you. And you say, aloud, to no one in particular, "I'm still here." Then you walk home, the past behind you, the silence broken, the story yours. The word closure gets thrown around a lot by reporters, by therapists, by well-meaning strangers who think healing has a finish line. You've learned to nod politely when they say it, but you know better. Closure isn't something you find, it's something you learn to carry, like a cracked cup you still drink from. By year 3, the story of Thomas Driver becomes a case study. College criminology classes cite him in presentations. Documentaries rehash the same voice clips, the same sketch. A scripted reenactment even airs on late-night cable, some actor in a fake beard portraying the Stillwater River killer. You watch 5 minutes of it and shut it off, because what they never get right, what they can't, is the silence before the swing. The feeling of Rachel's fingers slipping from yours. The weight of walking home alone. Meanwhile, the cold cases keep unfolding. Another woman comes forward from Vermont. Another from rural New Hampshire. None of the cases resulted in death, but the patterns, the stalking, the threats, the trauma feel eerily familiar. Police confirm it's him. Your case was just the one they caught. You wonder what would have happened if Rachel hadn't screamed, if you hadn't swung, if that bat had landed one more time, but wondering doesn't help. It never does. So you start asking a different question. What now? And slowly, the answer forms. You begin writing not for a publisher, not for a blog, just a journal, lined pages filled with pieces of yourself you thought were gone. You write about the guilt, the rage, the weird relief of surviving when you weren't supposed to. You write about the nurse who cried when she saw you walk into the ER, about the detective who handed you tissues without a word, about Rachel's mom leaving her porch light on every night for 6 months after the funeral. And one day, you write this line, "He didn't kill me, but he changed me." You pause after writing it, because it's the most honest thing you've ever put to paper. Historians still argue whether writing trauma is an act of reliving or reclaiming, whether survivors should put it down on the page or let it fade quietly. But you don't write for his story, you write for you. And in that process, you uncover something unexpected. You're not scared of your story anymore. It's not a weight, it's a root. Something you grew from, something Rachel planted without knowing, something that twists through every conversation you have now with friends, with strangers, even with yourself. Fun fact, in Japanese pottery, there's a practice called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken ceramics with gold, making the cracks visible and beautiful. The philosophy behind it, that scars don't ruin a thing. They define it. Fringe fact. Some forensic linguists believe that trauma survivors unconsciously change their speaking rhythms. Slower cadence, softer consonants, like your brain tries to gentle the world for you. You start to notice it. The way you pause before saying certain names, the way you speak more carefully, not out of fear, but out of reverence. For the story, for its weight, for the people it holds. At a panel discussion one spring, a teenager stands up and asks, "How did you keep going after something like that?" You look at her bright eyes, trembling voice, and you say, "I didn't, not right away, but I stayed." And that was enough, because staying in your body, In your truth, in the world is the first form of resistance. Thomas Driver is now in a maximum security prison. He doesn't get visitors. He doesn't talk to reporters. He spends most days in silence. But every year, he gets a letter anonymous, typed, signed only with 2 words. She lived. No one knows who sends them, but you do. You don't hate him anymore. You don't forgive him either. He's just irrelevant now. A shadow you've outgrown. You still see Rachel sometimes, in dreams, in reflections, in the face of a girl laughing at a bookstore window. And when you do, you don't cry. You just say, I'm here, I remember, and somehow, that's enough. You never expected your life to orbit around the word remember. But here you are years later still answering questions that begin with, do you remember when? And the truth is, yes, you remember everything. Not just the moment in the parking lot. You remember what song was playing at the party. You remember the exact shade of lipstick Rachel borrowed. You remember the one burned out bulb on the diner's sign that read, in open 24 hours. And you remember who you became afterward. That part, you're still figuring out because you didn't return to being who you were before. No one does. Trauma doesn't erase you, but it redraws your edges. Some lines softer, some sharper, and somewhere in that in-between space, you start to recognize yourself again. Not as the girl who survived, not even the one who got away, just Alyssa. You get a tattoo, small, subtle, the outline of a river, barely thicker than a pencil mark, coiled around your wrist. You don't explain it to anyone. You don't have to. You start hiking again, alone, sometimes, not because you stopped being scared, but because you stopped letting fear win. The first few treks are cautious. You jump at every snapped twig, every rustling bush, but over time, the woods become yours again. There's a stretch of trail near Stillwater you return to, not because it's beautiful, but because it's quiet, unclaimed. You sit on a rock, close your eyes, and listen to birds instead of sirens. You think Rachel would have loved this, and in a way, you bring her with you every time. One day, you run into Callahan there. He's retired now, looks lighter, less burdened. He tells you he's teaching a class on criminal investigations at the local college. Less adrenaline, more paperwork. He jokes, you laugh an honest one. Then he asks, ever think about speaking to my students? You hesitate, then say yes. The first lecture is awkward. You fidget. You second guess every word. But then a student, nervous, biting her pen cap, asks, do you still see him in your dreams? And you answer, not anymore. She exhales like she's been holding her breath for years. Historians still argue whether survivor stories should be taught alongside crime stats in classrooms. But the truth is, numbers don't bleed. Names don't tremble. It's people who make meaning. Fun fact, the term testimony comes from the Latin testis, meaning witness, but it also shares roots with integrity. To testify is to stand whole, to declare not just facts, but truth. Fringe detail for you. In ancient Greece, they believed that speaking the names of the dead kept them warm in the afterlife. You think about that sometimes, especially when Rachel's name feels like a matchstick in your mouth. Fragile, but still sparking. You keep saying it. You keep telling the story. Not to be brave, not to be strong, but to be true, and it changes people. After one talk, a woman in her 50s approaches you in tears. She says, I didn't know anyone else remembered what it felt like to be not believed. You hug her. No words, just shared gravity. You start getting letters, emails, messages from strangers, survivors, advocates. People who've never been assaulted but felt seen for the first time. You save everyone. Not because they flatter you, but because they remind you that this thing that almost killed you, it became something bigger. Not your identity, but your impact. You visit a state legislative hearing once just to sit in the back. A bill is up for debate, expanding funding for survivor trauma therapy. One of the lead sponsors uses your case as an example. Doesn't name you, but you know. You smile. Sometimes healing doesn't look like justice. Sometimes it looks like influence. And sometimes, when you lie in bed, lights off, fan humming softly, you feel the warmth of every person who carried you. Rachel, Callahan, that nurse, that fisherman, that woman who recognized her son's voice and still picked up the phone. You are a mosaic of everyone who chose not to look away. And now you do the same. Every time someone shares their story with you, you hold it with care. You don't try to fix it. You don't say, I know how you feel. You just listen. Because you remember, you always will. One morning, you wake up and realize something that would have been unthinkable a few years ago. You feel safe, not constantly, not in every room or every street, but deep down, under the hum of normal life. There's a thread of peace that wasn't there before. Safety doesn't mean nothing can happen. It means you trust yourself to survive if it does. You start dating again, slowly, cautiously. You don't hide your past, but you don't lead with it either. It's not a secret. It's just not the whole of you. And the man you meet quiet, kind, bookish doesn't flinch when you tell him. He listens, not like a spectator, but like someone rearranging space to make more room for you. The first time you reach for his hand in the dark and nothing inside you recoils, you almost cry. Not because of him, but because of you. That moment, the simple act of choosing closeness without fear, is a milestone no one else sees. No headlines, no courtroom cheers, just your own breath, steady and quiet. You still have nightmares, sometimes, but they don't break you. You've learned how to walk out of them. You build a new rhythm, work, walks, occasional speaking events, group chats with survivors who've become friends, a little dog named Penny who likes to curl behind your knees when you sleep, and somewhere in the mix of all that, life starts feeling like yours again. Then, a podcast producer reaches out. They're doing a series on survivor stories. Your name came up. They ask if you'd want to narrate your own episode. You pause, not because you're unsure of the story, but because you're protective of it now. It's not just a thing that happened, it's a legacy. But you say yes, because you found your voice, and you know how to use it. The episode drops. It's raw, no dramatic sound cues, no ominous music. Just your voice steadily walking listeners through what it means to lose a friend, to lose yourself, and then to find something stronger in the wreckage. The feedback is overwhelming. Survivors write, so do their families. A detective in another state says your episode helped him see a cold case differently. You realize something important. You never wanted to be a symbol, but if your story can pry open just one locked door, then maybe that's the purpose the pain chose for itself. Historians still argue whether personal narrative can change policy faster than data, but you've seen it with your own eyes, how a single voice, trembling and untrained, can echo loud enough to change a law. Fun fact. The first victim advocacy group in the U.S. was formed by a woman whose daughter disappeared in the 1970s. No one listened to her, so she built her own network. And eventually, a national movement grew from that one grief-stricken kitchen table, fringe detail. There's a theory that trees retain trauma in their rings. Lightning strikes, drought, fire. It all gets stored in the grain, like memory, frozen in cellulose. You think humans aren't so different. You carry your own growth rings. Some years split, some strong, all of them you. One day, you visit Fairhaven again. Not the lot, not the hospital, just the library. You sit near the back. Among the biographies, you find the shelf where someone once placed a book about survival, and you slip a sticky note inside the front cover. It says, "You're not alone. I lived, so can you?" You don't sign it. You don't need to. You walk out, sunlight warming your shoulders. For the first time in forever, you don't look over your shoulder. You don't scan the crowd. You just breathe. Long, easy, full. Because this is your town too, and it doesn't get to belong to fear anymore. The podcast gains traction more than you expected. You start getting invitations, panels, interviews, even one from a university symposium on trauma justice. You don't say yes to all of them. That would be too much. But every now and then, when the cause feels right, you go, not to relive what happened, but to reclaim it. Because by now, you understand. Telling your story isn't reopening the wound. It's showing the scar, and scars, as it turns out, are where the light gets in. You speak in a lecture hall, once 400 people, dead silent. The lights are bright, and you can't see the audience, which helps. You talk not just about what he did, but what came after. How the hardest part wasn't the night itself. It was the morning after, the silence, the disbelief, the slow erasure, and how every single time someone believed you, a piece of you came back. At the end of the talk, a girl waits near the exit. She's maybe 17, a hoodie pulled up tight. She doesn't say anything, just reaches out, slips a folded note into your hand. Later, when you read it, you find just 5 words. "He took my voice too." You cry quietly, not out of pain, but out of recognition. Because this is what survival does, it echoes. One voice makes room for another, and another, until suddenly, a whole room full of people know they aren't alone. The media mostly stops calling. There's no new drama to report. But every now and then, you get a message from someone who remembers. A nurse from the hospital, a neighbor who heard sirens that night and didn't know why, a retired cop who says, "I kept that sketch pinned to my wall for 2 years." They tell you their stories, and in return, you listen because someone listened to you. Historians still argue whether justice is measured by punishment or prevention, whether putting a man in a cell undoes what he did, but you've learned it's neither. Justice, for you, is existence. Still being here, still walking, still speaking. Fun fact. In 1997, the state of Maine began its first victim advocate program, designed to help survivors navigate courtrooms, paperwork, and trauma. You weren't part of that wave, but your case was cited in the funding proposal. You find that out years later, almost by accident, and it stops you cold. You mattered, not just to Rachel, not just to your family, but to the system, even if it took a while to see it. Fringe detail. Some trauma therapists say survivors sometimes develop what they call hyperclarity, a sort of instinct for danger that borders on supernatural. You don't believe in magic, exactly, but you do believe in instincts. Yours saved your life, and now they're helping others survive theirs. You start teaching a short workshop, nothing formal, just a community group for young women, held in a borrowed church basement with bad lighting and too many folding chairs. You call it Second Voice. Not first aid, not therapy, just space. And that space fills quickly. You listen as girls talk about walking to their cars with keys between their fingers, about saying "I'm fine" when they're not, about friends who disappeared, and no one asked why. You don't interrupt, you don't fix, you just hold the space open, and when they're done, you say the words you once needed. I believe you. One night, after class, you drive home and realize the tape in your brain, that loop of screams, of gravel under your knees, of Rachel's final breath has gone quiet. Not gone, but resting. You open your windows, let the cold air in, and for the first time in years, you sleep without the fan on. Because silence now isn't frightening, it's earned. You used to think healing was about forgetting, that if you could just wipe it all clean, you'd be okay again. But now, you know better. Healing is not forgetting. It's remembering without breaking. It's the ability to say Rachel's name without your voice cracking. It's walking past a man who smells like gasoline and not falling apart. It's knowing the worst thing already happened and you survived it. People start referring to you as an advocate, a mentor, a speaker. You don't correct them, but inside, you still feel like a girl who just wanted to walk to a diner with her best friend. Sometimes, you miss that girl. Other times, you're glad she became this version of you. You start receiving invitations to testify on state-level panels, survivor compensation, trauma response protocols, victim protection reform. You learn acronyms, study policy drafts. At first, it feels like another language, but eventually, you learn how to translate your pain into paragraphs lawmakers will actually read. You speak in front of a subcommittee, once fluorescent lights, polished microphones, people pretending not to check their watches. You tell them about the moment in the ER when the nurse screamed, the hallway silence when you whispered, "Rachel, he took her." You end your statement with just 3 words, "Please do better." And they listen. Months later, legislation passes that mandates 72-hour protective detail for surviving assault victims when abductions are involved. It's called the Monroe Clause. You find out when someone tags you in a news article. You laugh, then cry, then breathe, because for the first time in a long time you feel useful. Historians still argue whether systemic change begins with outrage or organization. But here's what you've learned. It begins with grief that refuses to sit down quietly. Fun fact, in 18th century New England, women who survived violence were sometimes given an oak charm to wear, a token of survival, passed from one woman to another. No ceremony, just quiet understanding. You think about starting your own version, a bracelet, a pendant, a coin, something small and smooth that says, "I made it, and so will you." Fringe theory. Some believe the body stores trauma not just in the brain, but in muscle memory. That's why a familiar grip, a certain smell, can make your knees buckle. But you've also learned the flip side. The body can store resilience. 2. In the way your hands stop shaking. In the way your spine stays straight. One afternoon, years after the trial, you get a letter in the mail, no return address. You hesitate before opening it. Part of you still expects bad things to come wrapped in normal envelopes, but inside is a card. Simple, handwritten. I was one of his almosts. You were one of his never-agains. Thank you. You hold it to your chest. You never find out who sent it. You don't need to, because that letter, like everything else you've survived, becomes part of a quiet, growing legacy, a network of voices, of echoes, of people who now see themselves in your strength. You still visit the woods sometimes, the spot near the still water. The air there is different, more still, as if the place itself has started to grieve. You sit beneath the tree where her clothes once hung, the bark now overgrown, the branch healed over. You close your eyes, you whisper a name, not out of pain, not out of duty, out of love. Because Rachel's not just someone you lost, she's someone who saved you, and you make her a promise, right then and there. I'll never let the world forget who you were, and I'll never let it erase who I became because of you. Time does strange things when you survive something unspeakable. Some days stretch endlessly, like you're still limping through that night, counting every breath. Other days vanish in a blink, and you wonder where the years went. But then you catch your reflection older, softer, stronger, and realize just how far you've walked. And you didn't just survive, you transformed. Your work grows, quietly, steadily. The community center expands your workshop. They give you a key and start calling you Monroe. When introducing new members, you laugh every time. You still feel like Alyssa stitching her story together, one thread at a time. Sometimes, girls from the group ask if they'll ever stop being scared. You tell them the truth. Maybe not completely, but one day, the fear won't drive the car anymore. You will. They believe you, because you know what it's like to walk barefoot out of a nightmare and into the light. Thomas Driver's name fades from headlines. He's a footnote now, a cautionary tale. His calls are archived, his tape recordings filed away. He doesn't haunt you anymore, but Rachel's name, that never fades. You start a scholarship in her name, the Rachel Dean Memorial Grant, for girls studying criminal psychology, or community care, or just trying to stay in school while healing. It's small at first, just one recipient, but each year, the number grows. And when the letters pour in hopeful, trembling, defiant, her name still means something. It always will. You walk with Penny one evening, golden dusk melting over the pavement. The breeze smells like salt and lilac. Somewhere in the distance, kids shout around a soccer ball. A sprinkler ticks through its rotation, and everything feels like memory and promise braided together. You don't flinch when someone jogs past behind you. You don't reach for your phone when a car slows nearby. You keep walking. You're not the girl from the parking lot. You're the woman who walked out of it. Fun fact, in certain coastal towns, sailors used to carve the names of loved ones into shipmasts before heading out to sea, not as superstition, but as anchorage, as proof that no matter where the water carried them, they came from somewhere that mattered. You didn't carve your name, you became it. Fringe theory. Some trauma experts believe that post-traumatic growth is real, that survivors, over time, can build stronger empathy, clarity, and purpose than they ever had before. You believe it, not because science proved it, but because you lived it. And now, as the world softens into night around you, you look up. The sky's bruised with stars. The moon hangs low, calm, watchful. You whisper one last thing. Not to Thomas, not to the town, not to the silence. To her, we made it. And the night answers you back with quiet wind and the steady rhythm of your own breath. You are safe. You are free. You are home. And now, we ease out of the story, out of Fairhaven, out of the woods, out of that October night. You're still here, still breathing. That matters. Take a moment and let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Let the quiet wrap around you like something soft and steady. You don't need to be alert anymore. There's no bat, no shadows, just calm. Let the name Rachel drift to the surface one last time, not as a wound, but as a light, a guide. A girl who danced at a party and laughed too loud and walked into history beside you. And if there's a part of you still holding on to fear, let it loosen. Just a little. Let it know the danger is over. The worst has passed. And now there's only this moment. Still, gentle. Yours. Imagine the stars above Fairhaven tonight, quiet sentinels. Imagine Penny, curled on the bed at your feet. Imagine Alyssa, older now, stronger, standing beneath that same moonlight you see out your window. And imagine this, not survival, not vengeance, but peace. You've earned it. So close your eyes. If you haven't already, let the day melt away. Let your body soften. Let your breath slow. You are safe. You are not alone. You made it through, and now you can rest.